Hey, everybody. It is Tuesday night, which means it is time for the 49ers Throwback Show. And I'm the host, Jack Hammer, and was with me always my co-host, Suneil from So Real Sports Talk TV. How you doing tonight, Suneil?
Doing fantastic, man. Feeling royal.
There you go. You are the king. You're the king tonight. There you go.
Man, it's very hot here in Southern California. I'm assuming it's probably similar over there in the Bay.
It is, and I'm not quite in the Bay Area. I'm a little bit south of it. I'm in the South Bay Area, and it is hot here as well, and definitely warm one. Trying to stay cool. Don't have air conditioning here, so doing the best that we can. Got a new camera though, so working that out too. Got a little bit of
it looks clean, man. I like it.
I like it too. It just came a few minutes ago, a little bit before we started. I was playing around with it, and the sun coming in the back isn't the best look right now, but we'll get it figured out as we work through it. We have a fun show. We were talking about a lot of different fun topics to discuss tonight. And, as I mentioned at the opening, that we call this the 49ers Throwback Show. And tonight we're going to throw it back for sure. We're going to take it all the way back to 1981, take a look at the start of the 49ers dynasty that would span really two decades. But before we get to that, there's some new news going on in the NFL. And you had the news today came out of Washington with the Washington Commanders giving Terry McLaurin adding 3 years to his current deal. 3 years. It's a pretty big deal. $71 million, depending on that outlet that's reporting it. The important piece is that it's $28 million guaranteed at sign, or $28 million signing bonus, $34.6 million guaranteed at signing. What do you make of that, Suneil?
Yeah, so obviously, congratulations to Terry McLaurin for getting broken off. This is interesting, obviously, because Deebo Samuel is in the same type of situation, coming from the same draft class, also looking for an extension as well. Now, one thing to be mentioned is this is it seems like the only receiver out of that draft class that wasn't repped by the same rep that Deebo has, because he reps AJ Brown, DK Metcalf, Hollywood Brown. So Terry McLaurin wasn't the guy negotiating this contract. However, it is interesting because one, it was a 3-year deal instead of the 4-year deal that AJ Brown received. Although the guaranteed money or money at signing isn't quite as high as the AJ Brown deal, I wonder if this helps out the 49ers a little bit more, because I wonder if a 3-year deal is something that would be more intriguing to them than a 4 or a 5-year deal, Jack, knowing the age of Deebo, as well as the decisions that they're going to have to make 3 years from now, especially with Trey Lance, possibly Brandon Ayuk, and some other of these young guys that may be coming up for contract extensions around that same time. Oh, I guess we lost Jack, even though he got a new camera. Unfortunately, there we go. I was like, Jack, he got a new camera, but didn't get a new internet connection, unfortunately.
No, I just wanted to make sure that you had the run of the show, because you're on a good run.
Did you get to hear what I asked?
I did not hear the question, no.
So basically I was saying, this being a 3-year deal versus a 4-year deal like the AJ Brown deal. This is less money than AJ Brown received as far as, guaranteed money at signing and also total guarantees. But I wonder if a 3-year deal actually is better for the 49ers, because in 3 years from now, one, with Deebo's age being older than these other receivers that are signing these extensions, as well as 3 years from now, the 49ers are going to be having to make some other extension decisions, namely Trey Lance, Brandon Ayuk, and some of these other young guys that were drafted in the last few years. So I wonder if a 3-year deal actually makes more sense for the 49ers as a team. Maybe not so much for Deebo, but I wonder if this is a point where they say, hey, we just saw Terry McLaurin do this deal. What about this?
Well, that would make it tough for the 49ers in reality, because let's go with the McLaurin deal, right? McLaurin, $28 million over 3 years. That's a new 3-year deal, but it's going to get split up over 4. So what's going to happen there is he's going to, that $20 million divided by 4, it's going to be $7 million just in signing bonus that's going to go towards his money for next season. So if that was the 49ers, if they were to do that, that would put them right up against their cap number. That would take up all of the extra money they have right now, because they gave themselves a little bit of a breathing room when they did the deal when Alex Mack left. So now with that money, they could extend Deebo Samuel, give him a $28 million signing bonus. If it's on a 4-year contract, that means it'll get split up over 5 years. So a 28 over 5 is going to give you, it's only going to be about $5 million. So they would have enough room to make that work. If they get it to a deal like McLaurin with 3 years, it doesn't work quite as well. So for the 49ers, it just depends on what that signing bonus is going to be. And
also it depends on what they do with Jimmy, right? So obviously, if they end up cutting Jimmy, then that does make sense.
Correct. If they move off of Jimmy Garoppolo once that $7.5 million injury portion goes away, whether it's through a trade or a release, none of this matters. They can sign them for pretty much anything because they'll have the money to do it. I'm not going to, obviously not anything, because there's other considerations, but from a standpoint of just Deebo Samuel, they can make it work. The salary cap isn't going to be a hindrance to getting that deal done.
Right. So let's say that money isn't an issue, Jack, and you're looking at it from a team standpoint. Obviously, Deebo, I would assume he wants the longer contract with more guaranteed money. It's more of a peace of mind for him. But from a team standpoint, noting that Trey Lance is 3 years away from an extension, Brandon Ayuk is 2 years away from an extension, Ambry Thomas, all these other young guys, Javad Kidlaw, stuff like this might be coming up for extensions. Would the team rather have money tied into the next 3 years versus 4 or 5 years? Or do you think they'd want a longer deal with less money, less per year, I guess?
I think they'd want to try to go a little bit longer with it. And the reason, okay, and not big, but the reason is because if you go, it helps you spread the money out a little bit. And then doing that will allow them to get these guys hitting at different times in their contracts, so that they can deal with everything else and the restructures and all that kind of stuff that plays along with it. Like, for example, Fred Warner is in a perfect position next year if they go to do Nick Bosa next year. They're in a perfect position to redo Fred Warner's deal, give him more money, guaranteed, lower his cap hit, and so on and so forth. So that they want to kind of stagger these things out. So it's hard to really give you a solid answer as to what the best way is. But I think right now, my first inclination would be to say that it'd be better to do a little like a 4-year deal, which is actually 5, right? Because he's under contract for this year, and then be able to move things around a little bit. I just think that that's more of the direction that they would take.
Now, how much do you think Brandon Ayuk plays a role in their decision making for the type of contract that they get Deebo?
What's that? Say it one more time.
Like, do you think Brandon Ayuk plays and is in the back of their mind at all when it comes to the type of contract they're giving Deebo, knowing that, I guess, 3 years from now, or maybe even 2 years from now, they're going to have, well, I guess 2 years, because that would be in his 5th year, if they pick up his 5th year, 5th year, because he's a first-round pick. 2 years from now, they're talking about an extension with him. So it's very unlikely that you're paying 2 quarterbacks top receiver money. 2 wide receivers top receiver money on the same team. Is that playing a role at all in their decision making as far as the type of contract they give Deebo?
I think we'll find that out. There's a decision here: is do you give the money to Deebo, or do you give the money to Samuel, or do you give it to Ayuk? Because that's what's, you're not going to pay 2 wide receivers a big payday. And you look at Danny Gray as the guy that they went out and they took in the 3rd round. Well, they're pretty, they really seem to like what they're getting. They're getting a good amount of production from their 3rd receiver last year, Juwan Jennings. He's a guy who is pretty cheap, that they seem to really like that type of receiver. They're not going to give him big money down the road. But where does this room fill out? Do they decide that maybe Gray is, maybe they're not sold on Brandon Ayuk? We saw what they did with him in the first half of last year. maybe they're not sold on him. Maybe he's a guy that eventually is going to be competing with Danny Gray for, either getting an extension or be moved off the roster for Gray, that type of thing. I could see that being more of a situation than moving Deebo Samuel for Danny Gray. I think that would weaken your roster more.
Right. Yeah. I just, for whatever maybe the team dysfunction with when it comes to Ayuk, the numbers don't project it, right? His rookie season was very similar to Deebo's rookie season. His second year obviously was better because Deebo was injured most of his second year. So this is the year, right? So this is the year that Deebo's third year, which was last year or last season, he put up the ridiculous numbers, 1,400 yards, passing or receiving 300 yards, rushing with all the touchdowns on both receiving and rushing. So if Ayuk has a breakout season this year, especially with Trey Lance at the helm, I wonder if that's playing a role in where they want to see maybe giving an option to get off of Deebo in a few years if they feel like Brandon Ayuk could be that heir apparent, just because Ayuk is younger, to be honest. So, Deebo is a little bit older at this stage, just because of the way he came into the league was a little bit of an older rookie than most receivers coming out. So ends up being, that's where I think, some of the calculations are coming into play as well.
It could be. And the 49ers hold his rights really for the next 3 years. They could franchise tag him next year. If he doesn't resign, they can franchise tag him. And then they could franchise tag him the year after that. So he's not going anywhere. He doesn't necessarily have to go anywhere. Nothing actually absolutely has to be done. I know, but the franchise tag is going to be pretty high because of all the money that's being paid out to receivers right now. So,
right.
They want to get a deal done. Doing a deal gives them a little bit more flexibility with where the money goes. We'll see how that works out. Another question we have off of Deebo real quick before we get into the 1981 49ers. Hugo throws out a question. He says, Jimmy is getting close to 27 mil this year, and Baker has about 18. If they trade for Baker Mayfield and cut him, how does that help the cap? And is that even possible? So,
obviously 27 minus 18 is 9 million. So you save 9 million. The problem is Baker's contract is fully guaranteed. So even if you cut him, you still have to pay that 18 million. So there's no way to get off of that money for the 49ers. So they would save $9 million off of the cap. So if they trade for Baker, there isn't really a reason to cut him because you're going to have to pay him regardless because he is in his fifth year. Fifth-year contracts are fully guaranteed. I just don't think that that's a smart idea, or the 49ers that's not even on their radar, because Baker's personality isn't one that's going to be content with being a backup. He wants to be a starter. I don't know if that is the type of mentality you want for somebody, especially when Trey Lance is a young quarterback. You don't want somebody that, feels like he should be a starter in the league, especially, the way that Baker's personality, I guess, may not be one that fits with the culture here with the 49ers.
Yeah, when you look at it from the cap standpoint, it helps the 49ers by lowering the number from 27 to 18. You get $9 million of relief. Is it possible? I don't think there's any reason that would say that it's not, because the 49ers would be, all the, as far as you trade, if you see teams trade for people and draft them and cut them in the same year all the time, from a business standpoint, it doesn't really make sense. So like you were saying, Suneil, that's kind of similar to like if they were to trade for Sam Darnold. It's the same number pretty much for Darnold. So it doesn't, either way, you're taking on additional money. The only reason why you do that is if you're going to, I think, be utilizing that player in some role.
Yeah, and at that point, you might as well just cut Jimmy because you're saving 25 million instead of 9 million, right? So unless you really feel like Baker is going to be a part of your team, and you look at him as a quarterback that you want to have on your roster, there's no point in making that move. If you're going to sign him to cut him, it's better just to cut Jimmy because you get more money saved. Instead of 9 million, you get 25 million. So I don't really see that as a situation that the 49ers are even contemplating. Yeah.
I don't see that either. I think it just comes up because the 49ers are, now at that point where Jimmy Garoppolo is going to be thrown in about the next week or two, which should then create some drama around around his movement and where he might end up. And so Cleveland right now has become kind of the front runner there because of the situation with Watson and all those types of things that you're aware. So
what did you make of that, Jack? I haven't actually been able to talk to you about that, so I'll give you my understanding of the situation. So a few weeks ago as well, I think the same guy, Jeremy Fowler, was discussing that the team had let Jimmy's camp, given permission to Jimmy's camp to start negotiating deals with other teams. And I didn't necessarily see that as trade possibilities. I saw that as more of an indication that the 49ers were probably going to just cut him, and giving them like the head start to be able to discuss and have something set so that they could, get onto a team before training camp quickly. That mixed in with Jimmy Garoppolo saying he expects a quick resolution to this whole situation, and him seemingly being able to pass a physical sooner than later. I think that the 49ers are just waiting for him to be able to pass that physical so they're not on the hook for that $7.5 million, cut him, and then Jimmy would be on a team very quickly that he's already maybe negotiated a deal with to be in there by training camp so that he could start, fighting or competing for a starting position with whatever team he chooses.
Yeah. And I think the thing here for me is I think the 49ers have some people that they've been talking to. It sounded like there was talks going on prior to the injury showing up, as far as the surgery, I should say, not the injury, but the surgery. And then that caused everything to stop. But it sounds like those teams, the teams that would probably be involved there, the teams are still looking for quarterbacks for the most part. And I don't know. I lean more towards them getting something back in the trade. Maybe not, a big, maybe not a second round, not a third round, but something. That's the direction that I lean.
So you think there's a realistic possibility that a team would take on Jimmy's full contract plus give an asset?
No, I think that in order to get the asset, the 49ers are going to have to take a little bit of the money back. Which
to me, I'm like, why would they want to do that? But why would they want to pay the money just for a low draft pick? Because I can't see a team giving more than a fourth or a fifth. How much are they valuing that fourth or a fifth more than the $25 million in cap space that they'll be able to have, especially knowing their whole defensive line needs to be re-signed. They need to, do an extension with Bosa. Jimmy Ward is up for a contract. Two of the three starting linebackers need contracts. You just talked about Fred Warner could be another extension. It seems like that money would be a lot more valuable than a fourth round draft pick.
Yeah, and I think that's partly why you'll see that money get rolled over. Now, I'm not talking about giving them big money. I'm talking about, just something to offset it. Even if it's $3 or $4 million, it's half of what they would have kept otherwise. I get it. I had this conversation with Rob last night. It kind of goes back and forth. That's a tough one for the 49ers to take any of that. The other option there is that Garoppolo, throughout this, they say they have a deal in place with Team X. Garoppolo likes it, and they decide that they're going to go ahead and extend him, maybe, add a year onto his contract to cut the money in half, so on, whatever. There's all kinds of ways that teams can make that happen. And, a team like Carolina, I find it hard to believe that they want to roll into this season with the quarterbacks that they have on their roster. They've won 10 games in the last 2 years with this coach that they have on there. If they win 5 games this year, is he going to be around next year?
No.
Right. And so that's why I have a hard time seeing them move forward with Sam Darnold and I know they have Matt Corral, who they drafted. I think it was round 3 or 4, whatever it was. Wasn't at the top of the draft. In-house and things like that. But I think that Garoppolo could at least carry them for a couple of years while they get Corral ready to go and be a better quarterback for them than what they're going to get out of Darnold. I think that's partly why we heard Carolina talk about the reports of Carolina wanting Cleveland to eat X number of dollars, $14 million or whatever it was of the contract for for Mayfield. They're trying to get they're trying to get the best deal possible that they can get.
Right.
We'll
Yeah.
see.
I mean, I don't really see a team giving up an asset and eating that contract. And for me, if I'm the 49ers front office, I'd much rather just get that contract off my books than try to eat any of it for a draft pick, which to me, I mean, they do well with those 4th and 5th round draft picks. But for me, I just think there's too many contracts that they have to re-sign, where a 4th round pick really helps as much as, even 4 or 5 million that they would have to eat, because that ends up being 10 million, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And then Bryant Culp, he's a member of the Toolbox. He says if Jimmy goes to the Seahawks, that can be very bad for the Niners. I tend to maybe agree with him to a little bit, because that is a team that runs a system that Jimmy Garoppolo can step into right now and function in. Their offense coordinator came from Los Angeles. We know that they can get it done. They don't have a quarterback up there at the moment. He's not going to give you the deep ball threat and to be able to take advantage of DK Metcalf in that way. But I think that he would be a good fit up in Seattle with them.
Yeah, I don't see it. Both of the receivers that they have over there feast off of the long ball, and Jimmy's just not that quarterback. Can they be the yak guys? Cool. Yeah, they possibly can. Is their offensive line as good as the 49ers offensive line? I would say no. So we already know how fragile, let's say, Jimmy is when it comes to being hit and his injury woes. He usually has a season-ending injury in odd years, so I think that every other year, I would say. So this is, I think Jimmy in Cleveland would be the best situation for Jimmy. But if he's the quarterback over in Seattle, I don't know if that's something that the 49ers are looking at and saying that the Seahawks are that much better with Jimmy than they are right now. I think the Seahawks just have a lot of holes, especially on defense, especially along that offensive line. And Jimmy doesn't seem like the type of quarterback that meshes with the skill set of the receivers that they have there.
I think it's fun. It's interesting to look at, because with Garoppolo, those 3 spots we just talked about, Carolina, Cleveland, Seattle, are all spots that really fit Garoppolo well in terms of what they do offensive wise and his ability to get in there. I understand maybe Seattle would be would be ranked 3rd out of those 3 teams, but even you go to Carolina, that's a passing game that's going to be geared towards getting the ball out quick, boom boom, with their new offensive coordinator out there, where that the Cleveland offense is similar as is the one up in Seattle. So it's going to be interesting to keep an eye on and see where he ends up, because he's not going to be back in San Francisco. At least I find it hard to believe that.
I agree.
And then real quick before we move on, Rob Bryant says, Robbie G, that like button, everybody. So please do go ahead and hit that thing straight down the middle, like it's a halftime. The band, the cheerleaders on the field, and you're warming up, getting ready to have a good time. And then Harold Murillo says, hello, everyone. So good to have you on board, Harold. Good to have you guys all on board. Now let's get into it. We've talked about the current 49ers quite a bit, and the name of the show was 49ers Throwback, and I had mentioned we're going to talk about the 1981 season, and let's get into it. The 81 team is what started off the dynasty that was the 1980s through was it 98, I believe it was, for the 49ers.
Yeah, so Jack, I was not alive in 1981. So this team was something that I only was able to watch highlights of and research through looking up stats and things like that. So I actually was kind of surprised as far as reading up on this team. And the biggest thing is just there's 2 things that really stood out to me about this team. One was, you always think of Bill Walsh and, the 49ers as a prolific offense, right? And so you have Joe Montana there, Bill Walsh. You're like, okay, this is the start of the West Coast offense. They were just, beating the brakes off of people because people didn't realize, how to defend this offense. But when I looked at the numbers, compared to the numbers that we see right now, it's not that prolific at all, right? It's very, it's like the whole team's numbers are for the whole season are less than, some of the average quarterbacks right now are throwing for a whole season. So I don't know why in my head I expected this offense to be like throwing for 8,000 yards and, it's 72 touchdowns and 6,000 yards rushing. Like, I don't know why those numbers are like in my head, but obviously we know that the rules have changed and the things have changed there as far as that. But this was known as a prolific offense, correct? Even though maybe the numbers don't justify it compared to the numbers that we're seeing, in today's NFL.
Yeah, remember that this was a point in time where the numbers that they were putting up, throwing the ball 488 times, that wasn't really the norm, right? Teams were a little bit more of a ground and pound, run it kind of style. They transitioned that and really turned the NFL game completely around. Walsh had done this stuff when he was in Cincinnati a little bit as the offensive coordinator for Paul Brown throughout the 70s. But this was really, where it really took off was with the 49ers in 1981. Montana, I know you mentioned the interceptions. It's just a different game in terms of the ability to get up and jam receivers and hit them and those types of things. It was a prolific offense, not the most prolific of 49ers teams, because they were still only 7th in the league in scoring that year. But they were solid. They were good, good enough. And then their defense, I think, gets really underappreciated. They only allowed 15.6 points per game. They had the second best scoring defense in the league that year.
And that was another thing that was the second thing that stood out. This secondary was very opportunistic. It seemed like everybody in that secondary, as far as the starters, had at least five interceptions, with a few of them having double-digit interceptions. I think as a unit with two corners and the safeties, I think they had close to 23 interceptions throughout the season, which is pretty good when you think about just being able to turn over the ball, which plays into why they were so good at keeping teams from scoring high. And I'm sure that really helped out the offense as well, because you're changing around field position quite a bit as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And you talk about that secondary, and that was a group that 3 of the 4 starters were rookies. Ronnie Lott, Carlton Williamson, Eric Wright were all rookies that season. They combined for 14 interceptions, and then you had Dwight Hicks, who was the veteran of the group, and he had 9 of his own. So, like you said, they had 25. I think that 22 of the 27 interceptions for that team, or maybe it was 23, like you said. Maybe my mouth's off a little bit there. It looks like it was 23 out of 27. So that's pretty darn good for 3 rookies and a senior. That was the group they called the White Hicks and the Hot Licks.
That's a great name. So what do you think going from, because I think the year before, what did so the 80 year, I didn't check what their record was in 1980.
Yeah.
Do you remember offhand?
Yeah, they were 6-10 that year. Okay,
so 6-10. So they reversed it, because in 81 they finished 10-6, which was interesting because that's kind of like a. They were 13-3. Am I looking at the wrong year? Okay,
1983 would have been the year that they were 10-6.
10-6. Okay, so they were 13-3. So they changed quite a bit. What were the biggest, I guess, changes that you saw that caused a team that went 6-10 to go 13-3 the next season?
They went out there and they got I think it was the defense, really, right? They went out there and you talked about how good that group was. They turned the ball over 48 times, meaning the defense they had 48 takeaways that season. They were a very opportunistic team. And they only gave it up 25, which was a big turnaround from the year before. It was the opposite. It was kind of the opposite, not quite, but not as bad on the turnover side. But that was really the biggest thing. It was those 48 turnovers between the 27 interceptions and the fumble recoveries that they had. That was the biggest thing. And then you look at what Montana was able to do and what the defense was able to do. It was just when you take the ball away and you don't give it away, you're going to win a lot more games than when it's the other way around.
Right. And talk to me about, like, obviously we talked about the defense, and the interceptions were amazing. I kind of gauge it similar to the 2019 49ers under Kyle Shanahan versus the 2018 49ers, right? There was the big shift where they went, from a non-playoff team to 13-3 as well, making it to the Super Bowl. Obviously, they lost in 2019, and this year in 1981 they won. But in the 2019 team, I think the biggest things were Jimmy Garoppolo was healthy, and they got a guy like Nick Bosa, who obviously was a game changer from the defensive side. If you were going to pick the game changers that were brought into the team, either through free agency or draft, you did mention, the three guys in the secondary that were all rookies. But were there any players that really stood out to you that were brought in that 1981 year, or drafted in that 1981 year, that were standouts that really changed the trajectory of this team?
Yeah, if you want to look at the guys who weren't there before, it's mostly on the defensive side of the ball. It's the DBs that we talked about: Ronnie Lott, Eric Wright, and Carlton Williamson. So those are the ones that everybody, obviously they're in the passing game. Those are memorable. But the biggest addition they made was a trade. I don't remember when the trade went down, but it was a trade that they made with the San Diego Chargers that brought Fred Dean over. He came over, I think it was either week 4 or 5, but he played 11 games in the regular season for him. And that was the biggest one. You talk about 2019 and the addition of Nick Bosa and what that did to the 49ers defense. That's what Fred Dean was for the 49ers in 1981. He had 12 sacks that season and just totally changed everything around. He was an older veteran, almost 30 years old, and he came in and just wreaked havoc right off the get-go.
Adrian's asking how many sacks did that defense have that year. I don't have that stat on me. Do you know offhand what the 1981 defense, how many sacks they were able to get?
Yeah, they had 36. They were led by Dean. He had 12, and then Dwayne Board was the other one. He had 7, and Lawrence Pillars had 7 as well. I think it was Pillars who made the hit on Danny White in the NFC Championship game. They caused the fumble that was recovered by Jim Stuckey to close it out at the end.
Nice. And then, when I saw the playoff run, it seemed like, the first game against the Giants, they won by a good margin. It was a safe margin. It was still relatively close, but not, I guess, I don't know if it went to the wire. I just saw the scores. But definitely that Dallas game seemed like it came down to the wire as far as, the score there. Can you talk to us a little bit about the playoff run and really stood out to you? And maybe even if there were some really big major things that happened in, the 3 playoff games that they ended up playing.
Well, I think you go back, you look at the game against the Giants. That was their first one, and that was that Giants playoff game in the divisional round. That was what you got used to seeing of those teams in the 80s. Especially in the playoff time, they came out and they jumped on them right away. They're up 24-7 at one point late in the first half. The Giants were able to kick a field goal and win in at half 24-10. Got a little tight in the third quarter, but then you had a touchdown by the 49ers, and then the play that I always remember from that game was the interception return for a touchdown by Ronnie Lott. That was the one that kind of sealed the game. It was I don't remember exactly if it was the left side or the right side, but I remember catching it, running the end zone, and doing his thing, and that was the big one. Was the pickoff there, because that put him up 38-17 in the fourth quarter, sealed the deal pretty much.
Right, and then talk to us about the Cowboys game, because that seems like it would have been one for the ages as far as if you're a 49er fan watching that game, because it seemed like it was really back and forth.
Yeah, that was kind of, it started out like the game against the Giants. It looked like it was going to be that kind of a game. The Niners got the ball. They went right down the field. They scored a touchdown, and then Dallas kicks a field goal. But then, that was a tough game for the 49ers because they just couldn't get out of their own way. If they turned the ball over 6 times and they still ended up winning 28-27. If they had just minimized it, if Montana hadn't thrown 3 picks and I think fumbled the ball twice, I think the 49ers would have blown them away. It wouldn't even have been a close game. It would have been more like what had happened in the the regular season game when the two teams played each other, when it was like a 45-10 blowout.
So Montana showed some chinks in his armor, huh?
Oh yeah, that's one of that's why I chuckle sometimes when I hear people complaining about the guy that we just talked about getting traded from the 49ers, because that's part of the game at quarterback. You're not going to play clean all the time. It's a matter of what you do when you make mistakes, and Montana was able to come back from it, and when the time was there, when the time needed to be made, he made the play.
That's awesome. And then obviously the Super Bowl was against Cincinnati Bengals. What do you remember from that game, Jack?
Well, with the Bengals game was, again, it was like like we talked about, they were blowing them out. It was 20-0 at one point in that game. They were playing well. It was 20-0, and then Cincinnati started chipping their way back. And the biggest play the biggest set of plays in that whole thing was the goal line stand. Cincinnati, I don't remember exactly what the score was at the time, but Cincinnati had the ball down on the 1 yard line. It wasn't like it was a goal line stand where it started off at the 6 and then worked their way in. It was right there. They were trying to take it in, and the 49ers defense was able to stand up and hold them. And that was really the biggest piece of that whole thing. That goal line stand. It was really a big piece of that victory for them.
Do you remember what the play calling was? Where they run like, so the three, what was it like? They went all. Did they go for it on fourth? Was it a couple runs? Was it passes? Like, what exactly was the stand like?
Yeah, well, they had a really big running back. Pete Johnson was his name, and so they got down there. It was first and goal at the 3, and they ran him into the middle of the line, and he got 3, and so that put him on the 1. So now it's 2nd and 1 at the 3, and that sets it up right. On 2nd and 1, they get a stuff for no gain. It's just a really nice hit at the line of scrimmage. I think it was Ronnie Lott was able to get in there and hit him on that one. The play that I think most people are going to remember was the play on 3rd and 1, and that's when they decided to try to throw the ball into the flat, and Anderson completes the pass, but Dan Buns is right there and gets the it's the fullback, and it was able to hit him almost it's a flat on the right side of the Bengals offense. As soon as the ball gets there, Buns is right there, hits him, and just stands him up and just takes him down. Just a really nice play, one of those plays for the ages. It was just a tremendous play. And then the next down, they tried to run in the middle, and it was just a wall. All 3 guys were there, and they were able to stuff Johnson right at the goal line.
That's awesome, man.
One of the interesting things, I'm not sure which play it was on. I think it might have been the 2nd down play. It was either the 2nd or the 3rd down play. They only had 10 men on the field. Keena Turner was supposed to be on the field, missed the call, didn't get on the field, and so they actually ran a play with only 10 guys on the defense, and they were able to come up with a stop.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, an inch here or there, right? And it could have been a completely different way of remembering this team, right? But they ended up getting the win. I mean, it seems, when you talk about some of the names, obviously Joe Montana, a guy like Ronnie Lott, these are names that just stand out, right? All-timers for the 49ers. Can you discuss some of the other all-timers that were on this team, and maybe even go into some of the coaches during this year that were just Hall of Fame, or at least 49er Hall of Fame type of players off of this team?
Yeah, well, you had Walsh and just trying to think of who it was. Walsh was there. You had the defensive back coach was George Seifert. He was the defensive backs coach. His assistant was Ray Broads, who you should know was a head coach at one point. Bill McPherson was a guy that was he was with them for a long period of time. And then Sam Weish was their quarterback coach. So, of that group of what I just talked about right there, Rhodes, Seifert, and Weish all went on to become head coaches in the NFL.
Right, and well-known, renowned coaches as well. What about players? Who are some of the stars of this team from the 81 team? Obviously, we mentioned, I think Joe Montana, Ronnie Lott are probably the two most recognizable names.
Mm-hmm.
But who are some other guys that might be guys like me that weren't around for that? Who are some guys that we should look into?
Well, there's Montana, and you missed Clark, right? Everybody knows about Clark because he gets the catch.
Yeah.
But it was Montana, Clark. On the offensive side, Montana and Clark were the main duo that everybody remembers. But Freddie Solomon, if Joe Montana hadn't missed a throw on first down a little bit before the catch never would have happened. He had Freddie Solomon wide open in the left corner of the end zone and overthrew him on first down. And so that's what led to the third down that ended up being the catch, was the miss on first down. So, and Freddie Solomon he was part of the team that won the Super Bowl then in 84 as well. Let's see, on the defensive side, on the defensive side, I know Ronnie Lott, everybody knows about Ronnie Lott. I don't know about how many people really know about Carlton Williamson and how good he was when he was with the 49ers. But the name that of that group, the other one is Eric Wright. Eric Wright was the cornerback from Missouri. And if he didn't have the injuries that he dealt with throughout, in his career, I think people will look back on Eric Wright as somebody similar. He was Deion Sanders before Deion Sanders. He was just a really good player, but just dealt with injuries, and that's what held him back. Because I think he had an interception in the Super Bowl. I know he had an interception in the Super Bowl against the Dolphins, but he was really good as well. Obviously, we talked about the pass rush with Fred Dean. Dwayne Board was a big piece of that team, and he would go on to become a coach. I think he might have started off with the Flyers, but he was a longtime coach up in Seattle with the Seahawks under Mike Holmgren. But he was a member of that team. Let's see, who else was there? Keena Turner. Everybody knows who Keena Turner. Maybe you don't know Keena Turner, but Keena Turner was a guy who he was with the team for sure. I know in the first two Super Bowls, he might have been with the team in '88, but that would have been the last of his run. It's funny because if you watch the documentary of Joe Montana that they did on NBC, it's funny to see the games like when he's in college going out and beating Dwight Clark's team at Clemson, watching him beat Keena Turner. I think Keena Turner even had an interception against him in a game between Notre Dame and Purdue. Those kind of things. It's funny to watch some of those as an old guy and kind of knowing the different names and things like that. Keith Von Horst was a really good right tackle for that team. There was just a lot of Jack Hacksaw Reynolds, who would show up. He would drive to the game in his uniform. He would show up to the stadium fully dressed, ready to go in his uniform.
Wow. A couple of guys in the comment section, they're bringing up Ray Wershing. What can you tell us about him?
He was the kicker. Kicker. Okay. So Ray Wershing was the kicker. Had a kind of a funny habit. He never wanted to look at the goalposts, so he would get out onto the field and he would look down the whole time. When he'd get there, he'd figure out his spot. He would look like he was a blind man, just like trying to figure out where Joe Montana was, because Montana was the holder.
Wow.
At that time. And then he'd just go out there and he'd kick the ball, and he wouldn't look up until he kicked the ball. That was the first time he looked up when he got on the field. It was funny.
Now, obviously, Jack, this 81 team started it all as far as, breaking through for the 49ers and winning the first Super Bowl. Can you tell us a little bit about what the dynamic was around the team? Was this a team move going into that year that had Super Bowl aspirations? Was this a shock to the league, or were they one of the favorites, going into the season? And talk about how this changed, I guess, the trajectory around the league, and specifically around the Bay and the 49ers, and how the 49ers kind of were on the map. Like, if it wasn't for, winning the Super Bowl and then the next four that they won in the next, couple decades, they wouldn't be the same 49ers that we look at them now. But this started it all. So talk to us about how maybe the 49ers were looked at before 81, and, what this 81 championship did to how they're looked at now.
I don't think anybody really expected them to do anything. This was a team that had just, again, very similar to like the 2019 team, where all of a sudden they just kind of came out of nowhere. It wasn't like they were
think we lost Jack again. Hopefully his internet will fight through it. I see Chrissy saying is a Cinderella team for sure. Guys in the comment section, if you guys know, and you can educate youngins like me and some of these other guys that may not know about this, like what are some of your memories of this 81 roster, this team, and what was surrounding this team during that time period as well. That would be great. While we're waiting for Jack to get back online. Brian, yep, I know Jack is frozen. His internet is still not up to where his content and his new camera is, but yeah, I mean overall for me, I love learning about the teams. I personally was not even born in 81. I wasn't born until 83. There we go. Jack coming in. We missed the last half of your conversation because you got frozen, but you were mentioning and talking a little bit about how this was more of like a Cinderella team, much like the 2019 team.
Yeah, like Chris, like I think it was Chrissy was saying there. Yeah, that was a Cinderella team. They weren't expected to do much. You go back and there's a lot of people you hear, even the team themselves kind of say like the turnaround for them came in 80 when they came from behind. They were getting blown out by the Saints, and they came back to win that game. And they say that was kind of the turnaround. But I don't think anybody really expected a whole lot out of this team. The team had just been so bad; they weren't even really close for a long period of time there. For them to come back and do that year was not expected, and to the point where when they blew out the Cowboys in week 5, I think it was 5 or 6, 45-14. They didn't even make the Monday night highlights, which really pissed everybody off.
Wow. And then what did this do to the team and how they were looked at, moving forward after winning the Super Bowl?
Well, I think the thing about that is I don't obviously it was great. Joe Montana became became a star because of what he was able to accomplish. But the thing about that is that they came back the next year. There was a strike in 1982. And they didn't make the playoffs. And so I think it wasn't until really 1983 that they started to establish themselves as a contender. I mean, they just won the Super Bowl, so that was great, but they didn't do anything coming off of that. And so, maybe a little bit of a flash in the pan. Let's see what these guys are made of, right? And they finally, when they came back in 83, they got to the NFC Championship game, and some bad calls at the end cost them. And then we know what happened in 84, which we'll get to probably next week. So it was really... I think it was the start of the run, but the run really didn't get going until 83.
Got you. That's great. Any personal memories, Jack, you could share with us from the 81 team? Do you remember, where you were when the Super Bowl happened? Were you watching it, or was it something that you remember live, or something you have to look back to remember?
No, I remember it all. I remember. We went to 2 games that season. We went up and saw them play the Browns on a rainy day up in Candlestick, and that's the one where my mom got mad at Eddie DeBartolo because we got the tickets and we didn't know it, but they're up in the upper deck, and the press box was in the way, so we only saw about we saw from like the 30 over. We couldn't see the end zone on the north side, and so she got all mad and wrote a letter to him complaining about not being told about it ahead of time. So we were at that game, and that was one of their losses. They lost 13-12 to the Browns that year. Mm-hmm. And then the next game we went to was the game against the New York Giants later on in the regular season, and it was the game in which the 49ers clinched the NFC West. We sat over in the north end zone in front of the scoreboard. One of the field goals went over the net. We almost got it. Then when the game was over and they clinched it, everybody started running on the field, and my dad's buddy grabbed me. I was like 7, 8 years old at the time. Grabbed me, and we took off running across the field. And if you've seen videos of that time of that team, when they clinched the NFC West, the fans were on the field. They all lift up Ronnie Lott on their shoulders and everything. Anyway, I was kind of in that thing. I was able to hit him on the leg, nothing big, but.
Nice.
Yeah, and then afterwards, we were one of the people. That's why the field was so bad in the playoffs, because it got all torn up. So we ended up with a nice sod piece of the candlestick sod in a pizza box that stayed in my garage for about 10 years after that. So
Wow.
yeah, so that was that. And then as far as the Super Bowl goes, yeah, I mean, I remember it all. I remember the NFC Championship game where I was supposed to go spend the night at my grandparents' house. My parents were trying to get rid of me for the night, and the news came on and they were showing the field and all that kind of stuff about it because it was going to be all rainy, and I got all excited because it was all painted up and everything. And I bugged my grandparents until they finally called my dad to come pick me up. But yeah, I remember watching the game at home, the NFC Championship game. I remember the catch. I remember everybody jumping up and down and being excited. And first thing my dad said was, "This thing ain't over yet. These sons of guns have come back to beat the 49ers too many times," because he had been through it, in the 70s with those losses that they had. And sure enough, the first play after the catch, the Cowboys, Danny White hits, I think it was Drew Pearson, coming over the middle. And if it wasn't for a great tackle by Eric Wright, the Cowboys are going to the Super Bowl, not the 49ers. He makes a great tackle, which nowadays would have been a horse collar tackle. But back then it wasn't. And the next play, they got to White, sacked him, fumbled it, and the 49ers win that one. And then, I remember watching the Super Bowl at home and everything about it.
That's amazing, man. That's amazing. Can't wait to get to 84, man, next week.
Yeah, 84 is a good one too. 84 is a little bit different. It's not as, it's not the first time though, right? The first time is always the sweetest. And I got, I'll tell you, I have strong memories of 84. 81, I probably have even stronger memories of. And then when we get into 88 and 89, those are the years that I was actually at all the games. So it'll be fun to go through this with you though over the next few weeks.
For sure.
Yeah.
Well, that's about all the questions I got for right now, Jack. I don't know if you have anything else that you want to say.
Yeah, well, real quick, Bryant asked a question over here. I'm going to hit up real quick. He says, yeah, Jack, in the 80s when the Raiders moved to LA, did it help the Niners at all, do you think? Yeah, I think it did to a certain extent. I think some of those fans that were, at that time, it kind of allowed them to take over, especially in the mid-80s. Raiders won the Super Bowl in 83, so that was the year that the Niners, actually was it 83? Yeah, they won it in 83. So that, kind of balanced it out. But after that, the Niners went on the run, and the Raiders being down in LA, I think, helped the Niners grow even more. So, that's it. You there?
I'm here. Yeah, absolutely.
All right. I thought maybe I lost you for a minute. Andrew says, Jack,
never that, man. Never that.
Jack, you need a time machine to go to the 80s. I bet you listen to hair bands and Huey Lewis and News. Hey, it's the heart of rock and roll. What are you talking about? It's still beating. But yeah, no, it was the 80s were a good time, and I was just thinking about myself today. This that I need a time machine long before Andrew brought it up in this stream today. But anyway, Suneil, thank you so much for joining me. It was fun. Thank you for the questions and allowing me to kind of tee it up for me to talk about the old days without doing it by myself.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I think that, and it's very similar. I mean, I think, once we get through all of these, I know we're a little pressed for time, but there's a lot of similarities. I know you've written about it a lot at 49ers.pressdemocrat.com. Shameless plug for your writing, but I know there's a lot of similarities that I think, us or, some of the younger generation of 49er fans probably could learn from how the team was run and, certain things that maybe, just kind of history repeats itself. So it'd be interesting, maybe one of these episodes that we could talk about some of the similarities between the teams of those years and what you're seeing as far as this new regime developing the 49ers, because I think it's very similar as far as the pieces in place and the coaching staff and, the stability that we have now. Hopefully, still need to get the results that, the Bill Walsh years were able to produce. But, I'm definitely seeing a lot of good signs as far as where it's moving, similar to how, these years went for the 49ers as well.
I agree with you. And, you look at the tenures of the tenure of Kyle Shanahan. If we just take it, if we can even go down to the player level, like you said, with the pass rusher, with Nick Bosa and Fred Dean and what that meant to the roster and all those kind of things. But even look at the coaches for a second. You have Bill Walsh struggle his first two seasons. He took over a bad organization. Kyle Shanahan took over a dumpster fire of an organization at the time when he came in here. They both struggled for the first 2 years. Year 3, they both went 13-3. They both made it to the NFC, to the Super Bowl. Walsh won it. Shanahan didn't. The next year, they both screwed up and weren't able to make it back to the playoffs. In year 5, they both reached the NFC Championship game. Both won 10 games that year too in the regular season. They both made it to the NFC Championship game. Both games were on the road. Both teams lost by 3 points on field goals towards the end of the game. So there's a lot of them there. So now, all that's left, no pressure on Kyle Shanahan. He just needs to go out and go 15-1 and win the Super Bowl this year. 16.
Just a little thing, man. And maybe they could even go 15-2 because they did add an extra game. But
there you go. Yeah. We'll allow it if it's 15-2. Anything other than 15-2, then we got to drop the hammer.
I love it, Jack. Well, we definitely have a lot more to talk about next week. But what do you got going on for the rest of the week here for you?
I'm going to take it off. I'm going to take tomorrow off like I usually do, just to kind of recharge a little bit, and then I'll be back on Thursday. Jesse's back finally. Took a little break for himself, and so I'll be doing Hammer and Nails tomorrow night with Jesse, Thursday night with Jesse at 5:30, and then at 6:30, I'm going to be doing another 49er fan roundtable with a good group that we have. So we got 4 guys. We're going to come on here and talk about hear the fans' opinion on the 49ers. Instead of doing a call-in show, we'll do it as a roundtable. It's kind of fun that way.
Love it, man. Love it.
Real quick, I'm going to ask you what yours got going on. But Harold, thank you very much for the donation. I appreciate the super chat. It says, keep up the great work, guys. Thank you very much.
Yeah, for me, I'm obviously going on to Jesse's channel right after this for our usual Tuesday show. Wednesday at 7 Pacific time on with Rohan Chakravarti, from 49ers Web Zone for our daily Wednesday show. And then probably do some fun stuff over the weekend based off of, what's going on. So pretty standard, getting back to a routine on the channel, Jack. But if you guys haven't subscribed, I'm 110 subscribers, Jack, away from 1,000. So I'm hoping to hit that here by the end of July. But we'll see. I've been saying that for a couple months, so we'll see if it actually happens.
Yeah, that'd be great. Hopefully you do. We'll keep pushing it, and that would be fantastic because we need to get you over that hump. And if we can do it before training camp starts, remember it's 4 weeks from today that they report, so it's not too far away.
Love it.
And real quick, I want to say thank you to everybody for joining. Thank you to Suneil for making your time to come over here. Really appreciate it. Before you guys leave, like Brian said, hit that like button. It's right there. I'm pointing to you. My hand's missing. Hit that like button. Hit the subscribe button if you're checking out the channel and you're not normally a viewer of it. If you could subscribe, that'd be fantastic. Would appreciate it. And then make 49ers.pressdemocrat.com one of your favorites on your web browser. Keep going back to it on a regular basis. Once we get to training camp in 4 weeks, there'll be new write-ups every day, as well as new shows here to cover that for you. So thanks so much for everybody joining. Make sure you check out Suneil's channel. Have a great night, and I'll be back 2 shows coming up on Wednesday. Take care, everybody.